11,000 years ago, someone built a pantry, and it changed everything. Not a cave, not a hole in the ground, a purpose-built structure. Circular, roughly 3 meters across. Raised floor, 7-degree slope inside for easy grain collection. Upright notched stones holding wooden beams off the ground to block rodents. Someone sat down, thought through a design problem, and solved it. The site is called Dra. It sits near the Dead Sea in Jordan. And the pantry they built there, one of at least 4 on that site alone, is the oldest dedicated food storage structure ever found. Documented in a 2009 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences by Ian Queet of the University of Notre Dame and Bill Finlayson of the Council for British Research in the Levant. Real place, real people, real engineering. But here's why Dra doesn't just answer the title's question. It obliterates something you almost certainly believe about how civilization started. The people who built those granaries were not farmers. The grain they stored, wild barley, wild oats, had never been domesticated. They were gathering it from the surrounding landscape and bringing it to a fixed structure built specifically for one purpose, keeping food safe from time and rot and creatures that would take it. Organized, communal, sophisticated, all of it, 1,000 years before anyone planted a seed on purpose. The pantry didn't come after agriculture. The pantry may have made agriculture possible. But to understand why that matters, we have to go back much further than Dra. Because the people who built those granaries were the end of a very long story, not the beginning of it. And the beginning is stranger than anything they could have designed. The first question is, what is preservation actually? Most people frame it as keeping food from rotting. That's correct, but incomplete. The real definition is modifying the conditions under which bacteria, fungi, and enzymatic activity operate. Microorganisms need moisture, warmth, and oxygen. Take away any one of the 3, and spoilage slows. Take away 2 or all 3, and it stops almost entirely. Every food preservation technique ever developed by any human at any point in history is just a different way of attacking those 3 variables. Your ancestors figured out 3 broad strategies. They found them independently, on multiple continents, across hundreds of thousands of years. And the first one didn't look like food preservation at all. It looked like fire. In June 2025, Dr. Miki Ben-Dor and Professor Ran Barkai of the Al-Kaw Department of Archaeology and Ancient Near Eastern Cultures at Tel Aviv University published a paper in the journal Frontiers in Nutrition that reframed a question archaeologists have argued over for decades. Why did early humans first use fire? The standard answer is cooking. Warmth, light, scaring off predators. All of those happened. But Ben-Dor and Barkai looked at the 9 earliest confirmed fire sites in the world. Sites dated between 1.8 million and 800,000 years ago, including Gesher Beno Yaakov in Israel and Evron Quarry, and noticed something consistent. Every single one contained massive quantities of large animal bones. Elephants, hippopotamuses, rhinoceroses, not the small game remains you'd expect from daily hunting. The remains of enormous animals, the kind that yielded millions of calories from a single kill. A hunted elephant contains enough meat and fat to feed a group of 20 to 30 people for over a month. That's not a meal. That's an asset, a caloric investment that required protecting, from predators and from bacteria both. Their argument is blunt. Fire was first used as a preservation technology. The smoke, the heat, the drying effect. Early hominins, mostly Homo erectus, weren't gathering wood and building fires to cook dinner. They were building low, sustained fires around their kills to smoke the meat, desiccate it, and hold off the rot long enough to actually finish eating something the size of an elephant. Cooking came later, probably as a side effect. Once the fire was already burning, roasting a piece of that elephant cost nothing extra. But the original motivation, the original engineering problem that justified the effort of making fire, was preservation. 1 million years before Dra, someone's answer to the question in this title was, smoke it and guard it. If that just moved something in your head, hit like, it's the only way this gets shown to anyone. Now, go back to the why ladder. Because Dra is still waiting, and to reach it, we need to walk through everything that came between. The second strategy your ancestors developed was cold. Not manufactured cold, found cold. Permafrost does something remarkable to organic material. The woolly mammoths recovered from Siberian permafrost, some with flesh still intact after 39,000 years, demonstrate a preservation mechanism that Pleistocene hunter-gatherers in northern Eurasia understood and used. You didn't need to understand the microbiology to know that meat buried in frozen ground in November was still edible in March. You just needed to try it once, and remember. At the Moldova 1 site in Ukraine, researchers led by Letitia DeMay identified a pit inside a Neanderthal dwelling structure, built, improbably, from mammoth bones, that contained butchered mammoth remains showing evidence of deliberate food storage. The site is approximately 44,000 years old. The pit was not accidental. The positioning, inside the structure, protected from the elements, suggests intent: store the surplus, come back for it, eat it later. This is a cognitive leap. Not just food is good now, but food will be good tomorrow if I do this specific thing today. Delayed gratification, expressed in frozen mammoth. And it wasn't only cold. Water was the other variable, and some early populations found a way to weaponize it. In 2016, archaeologist Adam Boethius of Lund University published findings from a site called Norja Sunnensund on the east coast of Sweden. The date, approximately 9,200 years ago. The Mesolithic, before farming reached Scandinavia, before pottery was widespread, before the standard framing of civilization suggests people were doing anything this organized. What Boethius found at Norja Sunnensund was a pit containing roughly 200,000 fish bones, almost all from the same species, sorted, concentrated, and, based on detailed analysis of the deposit, deliberately fermented. Fermentation, not accidental rot. Controlled anaerobic decomposition, a process where the absence of oxygen and the presence of lactic acid-producing bacteria transforms food rather than destroys it. The people at Norja Sunnensund were not storing rotted fish. They were storing a product, one that would last for months, that was calorie-dense, that would survive through winter without freezing and without fire. The oldest known evidence of intentional fermentation. 9,200 years old. In Sweden, with 200,000 fish bones as receipts. That is one number sitting in the corner of the room. But here's the one worth sitting with. Cold, smoke, and fermentation are all passive. They all require finding the right conditions, building around existing physics, exploiting what the environment already provides. Dra represents something different. Dra is active. Which brings us to the reversal. Ian Queet and Bill Finlayson spent years excavating those granaries near the Dead Sea. What they found, embedded in the design, the raised floor, the suspended beams, the sloped interior, the communal positioning between residential structures rather than inside them, was a picture of a society solving an engineering problem that didn't exist for nomads. A nomad has no storage problem. You eat what you carry. You carry what you can. The idea of building a structure dedicated specifically to keeping food safe implies something more. A decision to stay. Not just to stay tonight or this week, but long enough for the storage to matter. Long enough for the food you put in that granary in autumn to feed you in spring. Quaid and Finlayson argued that the granaries at Dra didn't follow settlement. They preceded it. The act of building a pantry was itself the first commitment to staying in one place. Sedentism didn't produce storage. Storage produced sedentism. And sedentism eventually produced farming. The granary came first. Then, the city. Every apartment, every suburb, every city on Earth traces a direct line back to those 4 circular structures near the Dead Sea, built by people who hadn't yet invented agriculture, but understood, with absolute clarity that food today could be food tomorrow if you built the right box. Subscribe if you want to follow this further, because where the story goes next involves what happened to the people who didn't build the box. Now go back to draw one more time. Stand in front of those granaries, the raised floor, the notched stones, the 7-degree slope for easy grain removal. These are not the marks of people improvising. This is the result of iteration, of trying something, watching it fail, modifying it, watching it fail differently, modifying it again. The people who designed that suspended floor had already lost food to ground moisture, already lost grain to rodents, already watched a winter's supply rot because something small and preventable went wrong. Dra is not a beginning. It is the end of a very long series of failures. The final design reached after every simpler version proved inadequate. The smoke at 1 million years ago. The frozen pit in Moldova at 44,000 years ago. The fermentation pit in Sweden at 9,200 years ago. And finally, the engineered granary at Dra at 11,000 years ago, built by people who had refined the entire discipline of keeping food alive long enough to be eaten. The question in the title, "How did ancient humans store food without fridges?" has an honest answer. They thought about it harder than we do. They failed, and tried again, and failed differently, and arrived at solutions that bent physics without breaking it. Smoke removes moisture and deposits antimicrobial compounds. Cold slows bacterial metabolism to near zero. Fermentation replaces harmful microorganisms with ones that produce their own preservatives. And architecture, a raised floor, an insulated wall, a sealed room, creates a controlled environment that mimics what nature provides only occasionally and unreliably. Every technique in that list is still in use. Your refrigerator is frozen mammoth pit logic with electricity. Your cured meats are smoked mammoth logic refined over 1 million years. Your yogurt and cheese and sourdough are the fermented fish pit in Sweden, scaled and domesticated. And your pantry, the shelves behind you, the cans and jars and sealed containers, is Dra, near the Dead Sea, 11,000 years ago. 4 circular structures. Raised floors. Notched stones. Built by people who had not yet invented farming but understood, with complete certainty, that the future was worth planning for. The refrigerator is not a solution to a modern problem. It's the latest iteration of a question that Homo erectus was asking 1 million years ago, beside a dead elephant, with a fire burning low. What other everyday technology turns out to be ancient human logic that nobody ever traces back to its origin? Leave it below.